Yeah, well, we can kick it off with just kind of naming our vet guys that we're going to kind of put our name on. Nico Collins, though, that's my guy. I've really liked him over last year. He stood out and he started like showcasing his route running abilities. I like from reception perception giving them a shout out. His yards after the catch is really strong, but his route running 91% versus man and over 80% versus press is, even when we don't have Diggs there, right? We have just a rookie in Tank Dell and him that they had to focus on, and they had a hard time even with press trying to shut him down, even when they're all over him. And that he saw a decent amount of double covers throughout last year, but he was successful through that with a rookie quarterback. Even though Stroud is a baller, it's still really telling when you have that young wide receiver that is able to connect really early on that quarterback. And I think the only question earlier in the offseason was you got Diggs, you got Tank, you got him, and only Tank is in contract really after this year. And then they locked him up and they paid him to showcase and say and declare that he's our guy. So I think that the team's actions also verify that he's their guy. I think that where I see him in the next couple of years is approaching, especially after, I think Diggs will probably be out after this year. Nico will be the guy, and I think that he's going to be that AJ Brown level when people are going to considering him teetering on that tier 1, but probably right in tier 2. And for that, I think, especially with everything going on there, it's depending on the owner in your league, they might also be willing to part, and it might feel like you're overpaying, and you might be able to actually acquire him before he becomes a Chase or a Jefferson or AJ Brown level.
Yeah. I think that's a good call, right? People might be scared with how many pass catchers there are right now in the moment, and if they're not thinking about that long term, I think that's a good call out. As someone that you're able to watch right now that could may not pay out this year with how many pass catchers they have, but maybe you will, because like you said, they've already invested in them. So it's going to go there. For me, for my vet, I had to think long and hard. I knew we've talked about wide receivers up and down, left and right for the last few weeks, or the last few times we've met. And one position I keep trying, and I'm like almost forcing myself to talk about tight ends right now. And so just because they're often the forgotten position, and especially if your league isn't tight end premium, there's only one spot required for them in most leagues that are out there. So not super important, but I think we talked about this a few episodes ago where, because the playing field's leveling out a lot more with tight ends, and it's not like either punt it or go with it. You have to really think about that position because people are getting consistent points there now. It's not just like, hey, most teams are going to be okay with getting 2 or 3 points a week from that spot. Because there's so many options now. And so one person I think about that might be under the radar, I think census rankings has him out of the top 12 currently in a lot of places I'm looking at for redraft purposes, at least. Maybe within top 10, depending on the league that you're looking at. But Pat Fryermuth, he is in an interesting situation, right? There's not a ton of places, and I got some of this info from CBS Sports. Shout out over there. But there isn't a ton of places where you thought, man, Arthur Smith and Russell Wilson going to a team is going to be an upgrade. Right. But I think that may be the case where they might be able to give a boost to what production can happen out there, especially for Pat Fryermuth. Deontay Johnson's gone, so there's some opportunity for targets that are out there. And you may not realize this because of how much hate it went out there for the usage of Kyle Pitts in Atlanta, but the Falcons were actually the number 1 ranked target rate for tight ends in the NFL. They targeted tight ends at 34.3% of their passes, which is huge. But they just had competition for that tight end position, where I feel like Pat Fryermuth doesn't really have that out in I almost said Seattle because Russell Wilson, but out in Pittsburgh. Dark horse for me to really make his way into the top 10 or one of the top tight ends we're talking about later on this year, and then possibly with his chemistry raising, and whether it's Russell Wilson back there or even if it ends up being Justin Fields, I think he has a chance to do well. He's already shown us flashes of being a 100-target potential type player. He got 98 targets in year 2. His rookie year, he had 7 scores. So I think he's got a shot to do really well, and we'll see what he does.
Yeah, I hate I hate Arthur Smith. I've always really liked who you tell as a Pitts owner over the last couple of years. But Pat Fryermuth is someone that I really have always liked, and I've always found myself picking up either mid-season or at some point in throughout the last couple of years. I've seen myself kind of picking him up. When you say Fryermuth is your guy, I think it's important also to say what is a because there's a this guy is going to be way better than where he's drafted, and then there's a oh, careful, this is a sleeping giant. So where are you really looking at him? And you don't have to give an official ranking, but just what type of pickup would this be for you if you're going after Fryermuth?
So for me, he's someone that I'd be comfortable targeting as my tight end in, like, say, redraft leagues this year. As I'm going into it, I think you'd be able to get him in some of the later rounds, and I'm good with him being my tight end. If I'm not going to be able to grab Laporta, McBride, Andrews, Kincaid, I won't say Pitts' name because I know that's triggering for you. But he's someone that I would be comfortable targeting as my only tight end of my team, right? So in any of our redraft leagues, and I may or may not, depending on who's listening, be targeting him in trades for someone that I can have as a stand-in, because I'm holding on to Hawkinson right now in our Dynasty League, who's obviously going to miss at least a good chunk of the season this year. So he's someone that I'd be comfortable having now, and if Hawkinson takes a while, I would be okay with him being my guy even throughout this entire year, and see if he pays off as someone that I can hold on to for a couple of years.
Yeah. I think one important call out is that Deontay Johnson, with leaving the Steelers, there is a opening for like who's going to take those targets, and there's a lot of unknowns there. And I think that if you're grabbing him for a number 2 or a filler for a couple of years, I think that's also okay.
Yeah.
It is. I think in years past where it was like 1 or 2 top player tight ends, he was more interesting to me. But I think that there's so many exciting tight ends that are out there that are giving a decent production that I think that it's almost a fatigue of that level of tight end, though it's still valuable, but it's more of a mindset of like remembering that even this type of tight end can be valuable, and he has upside. I mean, he almost hit 1,000. He was like 700 something yards as a rookie and 7 touchdowns, which as a rookie tight end is huge. And it's year 3 is usually where tight ends can, if they're going to break out, that's usually like the odds favorite of like the 4th year of when they really start showing and growing. So I think going into his 4th year, then I think that's an excellent your guy.
Appreciate it.